I'm Mike Ross. I'm president of Voice4Israel, and on behalf of Voice4Israel and the Jewish Federations of Durham and Chapel Hill and Raleigh-Cary, I wish to welcome you to today's program on police training exchanges in Israel. As I look out on the audience, I'm pleased to see that we have a diverse audience, that we have some students, we have Jews and Gentiles, and I also see that we have Patrick Biker, who's running for county commissioner. Thank you for attending. First, I want to address a very serious topic, and that is the rising tide of anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish activity here in the United States. It cannot be emphasized enough that law enforcement officers are sworn to protect us and have done so repeatedly. But their efforts at security are not perfect. And unfortunately, we've seen what has happened in Pittsburgh, in Poway, in Jersey City, in Muncie, and in Brooklyn. But policemen have bravely stepped in to save lives and have limited the casualties. Some have given their own blood, some have even died. I want to begin our program with a round of applause for our invited guests and any policemen in the audience. Two years ago, a local petition to the Durham City Council, initiated by people opposed to the existence of Israel, alleged 2 years ago, there's feedback though. 2 years ago, a local petition to the Durham City Council, initiated by people opposed to the state of Israel, alleged that police training in Israel contributes to police brutality against peoples of color in America. This was part of a national campaign organized by the Jewish Voice for Peace called the Deadly Exchange. At its core was a conspiracy theory that also blamed American Jews and our treasured national institutions for complicity in the police brutality of minorities. Make no mistake, this initiative was not meant to protect such minorities or to offer a pathway to peace and reconciliation in the Middle East. And it certainly was not about creating a thriving Palestinian society. It was rather part of a war on the very existence of the Jewish state, intended to demonize Israel so as to reduce American support for her. The local petition called for a halt to any potential Durham police partnerships with the Israeli Defense Forces or Israeli police. It said because the tactics that were taught, quote, further militarize U.S. police forces that train in Israel, and this training helps the police terrorize black and brown communities here in the U.S., end of quote. Well, one of the very notable organizations providing these exchange programs is the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange. Our own highly regarded Durham Chief of Police, C.J. Davis, has been a participant and a leader in GILLI programming, and she was involved in some of their programming during her time in Atlanta. In a response to a request from Durham's mayor and city council, Chief Davis made a statement regarding such exchanges with Israel, and it included the following. My training experience in Israel had nothing to do with terrorism, military tactics, or the use of or exposure to military equipment. My specific exchange was based on developing leadership academies, leadership principles, and building community and police relations with the growing homeless population in the U.S. Later, she continued in reference to the petition itself. During my short tenure, I had been quite focused on building strained police and community relations here in Durham, and find this issue, that is the issue of the petition, to be an unnecessary distraction and potential roadblock to that progress. As I think you all know, despite the pleas of the Jewish community and the expert opinions of law enforcement officers throughout the country, in 2018, the petition's claims were given credence by the actions of Durham's elected officials. Thus, Durham became ground zero for the deadly exchange efforts to demonize Israel across America. It was the first municipality where their efforts succeeded at a governmental level. So why are we revisiting this hurtful topic today? The lingering hurt we local Jews feel is magnified when we see our brethren attacked in our cities today. The anti-Semites have been fed on a diet of lies against Jews. Some of the perpetrators and their enablers have expressed a hatred for both Jews and the police, even accusing Jews for directing police brutality. Such beliefs are given further credibility by the falsehood spread by the Deadly Exchange campaign and the petition, which associates Jewish priorities with oppressive actions against peoples of color. Indeed, their accusations have shamefully fanned the flames of interracial division and anti-Jewish feelings at a very combustible time in our country. It is thus critical that damaging falsehoods not go unanswered. So today we wish to counter the defamation against Israel and against the overwhelming majority of Jews who support her, and to set the record straight regarding police exchanges with Israel. We are going to explore what these exchanges are and are not. In a conversational style, I will be interviewing two recent graduates of the Gilly program in which Chief Davis herself had participated. This afternoon will be the first opportunity for our community to hear accounts directly from participants of these police exchanges. Subsequently, we will have an audience Q&A, and please bear in mind that our guests are not experts on anti-Semitism, nor the political struggles which we have encountered here. They are accomplished law enforcement agents with great professional expertise. They will be giving us truthful information and expert opinion regarding their experiences in Israel. Now I'd like to introduce Bob Gutman, co-chairman of Voice4Israel, who will talk a little bit, well, he'll introduce our speakers and tell you a little bit about the Q&A process.
Thank you, Mike. You so successfully stole most of my thunder. It'll be short. But I do want to especially express our appreciation to Dr. Robert Friedman, who is the founder of the Georgia State University International Law Enforcement Exchange, which is a branch of the Andrew Young Institute at Georgia State University. He's been doing this for about 20 years, and we are very grateful for everything he has done to elucidate these issues. We have two gentlemen today, Deputy Director Gerald Thomas, who's raising his hand. He is a state police officer with some very interesting associated duties with city police and county sheriffs. It's a very interesting relationship. And Captain Lars Paul of Fayetteville. I'm most grateful to these gentlemen for their willingness to give us their time and effort. They drove here for this purpose, and we are very grateful. Deputy Director Thomas said in a report to the state, "This is by far some of the best training I've ever participated in," referring to the exchange program he attended. "It is a multifaceted approach for law enforcement agencies and how we do our job, which is crucial today." Captain Paul is a standout because of the effectiveness in community policing, mostly in the area of opioid reduction in his city. Mike, as he already said, will initiate the questions and answers in an informal manner, during which time Marcia Harris and I will be passing around cards and pencils so you can put your questions on the card, and we will select those questions which represent the variety of opinions or thoughts in the community, and I think the whole process will probably take something like 75 minutes. Mike?
I think we're going to need to go live.
Mike needs the mic.
It's working. So why don't you let them share it? So, we had a wonderful conversation at lunch. We had a wonderful conversation at lunch just now. No? It's a fine balance between that and the reverberation.
Just talk louder.
We were in the Marine Corps, so we don't need mics. I spent my career working in a dog room.
All right. So we had a nice conversation over lunch that I wish I could replicate here, but I'm going to ask some of the questions we talked about. But first of all, I wanted to hear about, how did you hear about and get involved and able to participate in the police executive training in Israel through Gilly?
So I'll start. Dr. Friedman had come in contact with Director Scherleiter, State Bureau of Investigations, who I work for, and had offered him this opportunity, and he was off traveling somewhere else. And sent me an email on a Saturday night, and without the interest in going to Israel, and of course, not a lot of pretext that kind of took me off guard flying. How long? Mine was that simple. He asked could his number 2 go. Of course, I had never been there, and any training is good. In our world, we say there's no bad training. There's just some expected notes. And quite frankly, I'm a bureaucrat by nature now. What I do, so I'll 2 weeks in a foreign country where I won't be making phone calls and getting emails. Sign me up.
And Lars?
My chief, Chief Gina Hawkins, was a graduate of Gilly, and with her executive staff, she lets us more or less put out a wish list of things we want to do. And so I'm coming towards the end of my career. I've already been at the FBI National Academy, West Point Leadership School, things like that. And Gilly was something that I've never heard of before, so I researched it, and that was on the top of my list. And since I did my time in internal affairs for a few years, which is not the most enjoyable assignment, typically. I think my reward was that she got me into the Gilly. She approved me going to the Gilly program. So I applied, was approved, and it was a great experience.
Can you briefly summarize the areas of focus of the training program? Yeah, go ahead.
More or less, it was all police focused. I think it was heavily focused on community-oriented policing, how they do things in Israel, also the use of technology. I could probably go on for, we could probably sit here and talk about the trip for 4 hours, but those are the 2 things that really stood out to me was how the Israeli police are trained and organized, how they interact with their citizens, how they with the communities, and how they deal with challenges, the unique challenges they face there. And surprisingly, it's a lot like the challenges we face here, believe it or not. It's very similar. So that's kind of the overall theme of the trip.
We'll dive in a little bit more, but
Just briefly about the background. So the captain and I and David Rouse is the director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. So we were the only 3 that were not law enforcement officers from Georgia. Maybe a handful have been from North Carolina, I think. Dr. Friedman would love to expand that, and as it catches on, more and more folks want to do that. The university's there, and it's something they're very familiar with. We'd never heard of it. To be selected, you're toward the end of you're the senior leadership. We had a couple sheriffs, several chiefs, captains, the number 2, number 3 of most agencies. So part, in addition to the technology and community policing, was that leadership. There's this underlying development of leadership that all of us went for. We were introduced to most of the senior level policing in Israel throughout the state. So just that connection, camaraderie.
could you talk a little bit about your feelings about the connection between police and the citizenry?
In my other world, I teach at Greensboro College, and I'm a sociologist by trade and education. I'm an adjunct professor, so not having been there, Dr. Freeman gives us books and suggested things to kind of bone up on the history and what you may expect. And of course, you can read all you want, you have to go experience it. That's what I would say. So my perspective was I came in with what the news, the geopolitical situation. We were joking at lunch. I had convinced myself it was an arid desert. I like geography, so you know kind of how big it was, but I was overwhelmed that one, it's very green, and then two, the variation in climate and just land structure between Fayetteville where we started and Lodge, which is my favorite town, the distance. I was amazed throughout. To answer the question, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I had convinced myself there would be, like it is here, it's a us and them, a you and me kind of culture. Two major religious groups living amongst each other. I convinced myself that I ought to be able to see, because I'm a worldly person, I thought that I should be able to distinguish between the two. I could not. And that I would see things at a bus stop, folks standing in one group or in another group, just kind of the cliques and the peer groups we have here. Throughout the 14 days, I never experienced any us and them. There were, of course, places we didn't go into Palestine. I may have seen a difference there if I went in. Just traveling throughout the country, the citizens appeared to be very integrated, and we never got a sense that the country is constantly under the threat of violence and war on all sides. There was no feeling of that. I was surprised most of that.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience when you went to the Israeli Police Academy and what you saw there? Either one of you can comment.
First of all, I was very impressed with the scale. This is the one academy that every Israeli police officer goes to. It was incredible. They had huge facility. First impression was we walked in, and just the atmosphere seemed like they really. This went for the whole trip. You got the feeling that the Israeli leadership, the police leadership, really truly cared about their police officers and the citizens, and that they were all one. Part of all the decorations, all the sculptures and paintings inside the police academy were all done by Israeli police officers who had been either wounded or had been on active duty for, it could be in Osterhof shootings, as part of their therapy to get back to duty. So that kind of stuff is really, that was really thinking outside the box. It's really a novel concept that I'd never seen before. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I said, the academy itself was world-class structure as far as the shooting ranges. There's a big emphasis on physical fitness. All the recruits were highly motivated. They all wanted to be there. I was just really impressed by the whole setup.
We have nothing I've ever been exposed to in almost 30 years of law enforcement to touch it. Most impressive was, it's all new, clean, fresh coat of paint. Don't know about the SBI, we're in a building that was built in 1940, I think. Good state government. They had developed a small city for their training, which impressed each of us. To give real-time, real-life scenarios instead of, hypothetically, you go to a convenience store. Well, they built a convenience store. They built a hotel. They built streets and bus stops and pretty much anything that day-to-day operations you may encounter. And what do we do with this? And so real-time training, something we would have to do it in some kind of simulator. It just doesn't exist here. Most of the folks were impressed with the physical fitness, I'll call it a gym. It was not a gym. The facility was as large as this facility. pool waves, or some folks doing yoga. I mean, we were all in this.
Can you talk a little bit about any efforts at community building between the different peoples of different faiths? Maybe Lars, you can talk about that.
One example off the top of my head, the most in-your-face example that we saw of that was in the city of Akko. Okay. There was a mosque there. It's I think it's the fourth most important mosque in Islam. I forget the name of it, but anyway, the imam from that mosque and a rabbi, the local rabbi, we actually invited to meet with them. They sat down with us and talked to us about what they do, how they work together to kind of keep the peace together with the police. And remind me, it's a lot of what we do here in my city of Fayetteville. We have a relationship all the way down to the officer level with members of the community. So the police there, they can call this imam or this rabbi if there's an issue, like if there's a fight or anything that can spark violence. And they can kind of put an end to it. They can kind of nip it in the bud, so to speak, before it gets big. Because after all said and done, you could tell they were friendly with each other. They might not really like each other that much, but their mutual interest was, and it was made very clear to us, they all live in the same city, and they did not want their city to burn. Period. Everybody still has to live there after violence. So that was the most, and they work together with the police all the time. Very, very close relationship with the police, and that was one impressive example I saw.
I don't know how long it's been going on, but it was made clear to us that there's been a concerted effort to incorporate Arabs into the police force, where we would, here in the States, and particularly North Carolina, we have an emphasis in North Carolina law enforcement that we want to have a police force that reflects our community. That's ideal for any agency. And it just goes to show that, even there they were making the effort. We got varying degrees of skepticism on will it be successful. We will hear from some that it's absolutely successful in here, and Ruby grow here. Even a small country, there's just like our state, different areas that vary between of acceptance and
Can you mention the most important things that you learned and anything specifically that you brought back here that were useful in your duties in the United States?
So technology, the Israeli police force is far ahead of North Carolina law enforcement technology. I recently went to New York City for about 3 days just to look at some specific technology that we may want to incorporate here on a state level. So it's explained in depth and shown to us, and it's easy for us to see the need. Again, we can agree to disagree, but the United States is not surrounded by hostile nations wanting to, on a day-to-day basis, cause us harm. So because of that, Israel's had to adjust, and your technology is going to adjust with it. In particular, license plate readers. There are states in our nation that have that. They're very successful. North Carolina, there's a little resistance getting that to take hold here. We went to what is equivalent of our fusion center that we operate, the State Fusion Center, and could just see. It's monitoring traffic. They get alerts on cars that have been tagged that we need to speak with that person or we need to deal with that person. They're in drones. They were kind of getting into drones. That's something my agency started about a month before I went, so I was very interested in that. They spoke at the Haifa police, so I don't remember if it's universal across the whole country, but at least in Haifa, they were very pleased. The police were pleased with the way of dispatching that had come about. 2 man cars, and they had instituted some updated records management systems and call history like our enhanced 911 that they knew when if they were dispatched somewhere, they could get a little more information than just who's on the other side of the door. Previous call histories and things like that, and the officers were very pleased with that. That's something we've had, at least here, the enhanced 911, we can kind of know through call history what to expect, of course. You never know who's behind the door. That was something that's changed there. We were a little ahead on that. They were implementing it. But license plate readers, camera systems, the ability to get information, relay it, use the technology and push it back out in moments was probably the most impressive. To me, there's nothing unique to Israel that we don't have and have had for decades. The Bearcat, the armored personnel carrier, the heavier ballistic vest, riot shield and helmets, things of that nature. What you think? I mean, that has been an American law enforcement culture for decades, and certainly in North Carolina.
So I have to stand up every once in a while. My knees are like 80. From being on SWAT for 18 years and Marine Corps before that. So, yeah, the military, I was kind of disappointed as well. We didn't see any IDF stuff other than kids at bus stops with their packs, I guess, getting ready to go on reserve duty. That's about all we saw of them. And then, as far as the police themselves, they weren't any more militarized, so to speak. And I hate that term, militarized. That's basically a term used to demonize police departments for nobody's rolling around in tanks. People like to say tanks. The Bearcat, an armored personnel carrier, is not a tank. What it does is it allows you to not get shot, therefore not having to shoot the person shooting at you. So if I have my team in an armored vehicle, we're less likely to shoot our own citizens, because we don't have to. When it's like we're hiding behind a police car with no armor protection. So it's really a misconception. It's really disappointing that a lot of our citizens here kind of push that propaganda, I guess, until they need armor protection. Because while one of our armored vehicles is protecting the officers, we always have another one. The other one's going around evacuating all the houses around where the crisis is happening. That's what we use armor for, in order to evacuate wounded citizens and wounded officers safely. Anyway, that part I got off track, but that's kind of the equipment. They had the same equipment we have. Anyway, there was a few things that were a little different. They had a crowd control agent they called skunk spray. I thought that was pretty cool. We probably couldn't get away with using it here. It seemed pretty effective. It just stinks, and everybody runs away. And it was biodegradable. That's what they told us. It seemed like we got to smell it. It was pretty foul. That's the only thing that they had that we don't have and that we reuse.
Well, truthfully, their average police officer that we would see day to day, the blue shirts, what I'll call them, I mean, just their police officer, carries a sidearm and a pair of handcuffs. We never saw rifles and all this equipment they had. They're not walking around like, even in our culture, depending on the jurisdiction that you may see. I mean, every one of my agents have an AR-15 rifle. It's where we are. I mean, they have them, but they're not displaying them. They're not at the bus stop with rifles. I mean, again, I don't think the population there would be too offended as they would here if we did, just because I think people got it there. My take was, people get that there are folks that aren't our friends, and hey, they're on all sides of us. I mean, I think you could actually be more militaristic, and that culture would go, we get it. We didn't see that. It's really, they weren't wearing vests. I mean, it's hotter than Hades there. I'm sure they get used to it. It's fun. So, but here we'd be wearing vests and things like, I mean, you know what our officers wear. It's just, it wasn't the same. It was really kind of, reminded me of Mayberry. I mean, they wore guns. I mean, they were relaxed in their blue shirt, they have a car, and I can think where the local officer probably, on a day-to-day basis, probably wouldn't even need that thing.
One of the things Robbie Friedman at Gilly has spoken about is leadership, and one of the things you were talking about, which impressed me earlier, was the relationship between the leadership in the police force and their blue shirts. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so there's a sense of service throughout the citizenry of Israel. If I had to sum up, that would be my closing remark. There's a sense of citizenry. That comes from compulsory service, I would deduce. I think there's a close connection between military, law enforcement, security, and the citizenry, because I don't know what percentage is, but nearly all, if not very high percentage, unlike our culture. So I think it's not an issue. It's just become second nature. You would have someone in the family that is serving or has served, or you come from a long line of service. It's that sense of service.
You spoke earlier to me about the leadership in the police force and the regular policemen, I thought.
Yeah, there's a clear delineation of chain of command, like in any law enforcement. They are very respectful to one another. I'm not saying we're not in our culture. It was clear that they were here, it was their job, and it was clear that it was service to their country and to their brothers. That was clear. You just feel it. The one thing that both of us were impressed by is, and I guess for the police it's kind of cool, any event, the police are in charge. And that is a unique thing that is different than American public safety. There's an event where law enforcement is there. The chain of command is when the law enforcement arrives, law enforcement is in charge. Be that terrorist, be that assaults or the ambulance, fire, all of those things, law enforcement's in charge. And of course, that's great for us. We don't have that.
You told me you were impressed with how quickly they cleared crime scenes.
Yes, we were both talking about it. So here in our American law enforcement is very, things are drawn way too out. So if we have a homicide, I mean, it could be hours and hours before we clear that crime scene, sometimes days. If y'all been in a wreck, especially in a rural outward, we're waiting on the high patrol and it's not their fault. It's that you just don't see them have enough troopers to cover the roads. You may have an hour wait, especially it's coming up winter. I know it's 70 degrees outside, but it's supposed to be snowing. And if you have the misfortune of wrecking this winter in the snow, I mean, calls backed up, you're going to wait an hour or so for a wreck report. They made it clear to us that it is intentional that these situations are dealt with, cleared, and things are made to get life back to normality as quick as possible. We're here, we're going to keep a family waiting to take control of their house again for hours and hours, or maybe a day or two, just depending on the severity of the incident. They made that clear. I mean, a terrorist event, hours. And it's not that they're any less methodical or anything less than we are. It's they've got their act together, and they've got a system. They know who comes, that you know what your job is. Get in, do it, get out. And the citizens, it takes that too. The citizens realize we've got to deal with this. It'll minimize our life. 20 minutes, and go back to the market and do whatever.
So if one of your colleagues was thinking about this, what would you tell them, Lars?
Thinking about going to Gilly?
Yeah, or on any exchange to Israel.
I would highly encourage it. Well, most of the people in my department want to go already. So we've got several on the waiting list. So hopefully North Carolina will get more slots. I need to say, if Durham doesn't participate in the program, that's at your own peril, because we'll gladly take your slots in the Fayetteville PD to send people to go. So, yeah. Another thing is, it's not just looking at things and learning, it's the networking through Robbie Freeman and even directly, I've made contacts over there that I can, well, we use WhatsApp now, Messenger, Instagram. That's how you get a hold of those guys over there. I wouldn't call them, but they're all very tech savvy. So there's some cops over there I can bounce ideas off of right now if I wanted to, and vice versa. They could come. They could come and ask me questions, say, how do you guys approach these problems, or what about this piece of technology? So it was a big networking thing too, and that was really good.
From a personal standpoint, I know that the whole trip wasn't policing. There was time to enjoy, and were there some memorable times or experiences you had in Israel that were outside the domain of policing?
So two Gentiles up here. The Saturday thing where all lights off. That was unique to us.
The elevator, the Shabbat elevator. I know we stayed at an elevator for 15 minutes. And then we made the mistake of getting on it. You didn't get down, and it goes up and down. You do that once. The Saturdays were kind of the less intense training days because if you've ever met Dr. Friedman, he's nothing. He's timely and he sticks to the schedule. So it wasn't a lot of downtime. It was full days. We got to tour Jerusalem, the old city, a lot again. I mean, that's like the beach in Vegas all rolled into one. Remarkably, never saw an officer there. I mean, I know they're there, but it just gives you the sense of they told you too that all people come to a lot, and it's kind of, they described it as Vegas, that everyone gets along. Tel Aviv, so I had psyched myself up watching TV. I'm from the Greensboro area, and before this trip, I guess Israeli tourism was trying to get folks to go to Israel, and it was all about, tip, young, which I am either. But come to our new beautiful city, that was the least impressive to me. One, because I had my expectations were so high going in. And, it's still beautiful, the food's fine, it's right there on the beach, what goes wrong, but I kind of psyched myself up to like New York City or something. It wasn't. I think seeing some of the historical sites, I think that was done intentionally to teach us the history of the region, to get us to understand why things are done the way they are there, and give us an appreciation of the different groups, the different religious groups, and why, kind of how things developed.
An example would be we went to Masada, and though that is a day for us to do the Dead Sea at Masada, the lesson there was all of their officers, not the street officers, but their command officers, all come to Masada, and it's about the struggle of the Israeli people and leadership, and that message was carried over to us because we were senior officers of our agencies. A little history lesson there for us.
Bob, are you
We have some terrific questions.
Okay, I just have one more question though. I want to, if you had a message to Robbie, the one complaint that you had about the trip, are you willing to explain to this audience what this was?
Well, present. So again, as I stated in the beginning, all of us are kind of here within like 5 years of our 30-year careers, so we're all 45, 50, plus or minus, mostly on the push to 50. This line of work is rough on your body. It's a young man's game. And, so, with that in mind, 60 of us on the bus, traveling around, drink water, so you know where I'm going with this. The only complaint we would have in retrospect and for future delegations is to build in
more bathroom breaks. And everywhere you stop, there's like one stall bathroom.
We should also have the police department, and they're just used to, officers aren't at the police department, they're out in the community, and there's 2 urinals. Well, there's 60 less.
We'll have one on the bus, maybe a bus with a bathroom in it, could be nice.
Thank you.
We have some terrific questions. I've grouped some of them because they are similar. So I'll try to handle it that way. And there's only one that I really couldn't read, so I may have to omit that. Let me start with this one. Did you see anything on your trip that concerned you about violation of human rights?
I don't. I can't off the top of my head. No.
I'm trying to say yes, and I can't, so I'm trying to go through 14 days. Their philosophy of policing is no different than American policing. It's respond and deal with whatever the situation is. They are under the model that every situation does not need to end in an arrest. For decades, American law enforcement, maybe global law enforcement, that's the answer. We're going to arrest our way out of any problem. And certainly in the last decade and perhaps two, that philosophy is changing. So there are numerous things, opioid crisis is one great example in Fayetteville, that we know we will never arrest our way out of this problem. Never saw a cabal of officers or anything that, what are they doing? It was, everything appeared to be on the norm. An officer in a car, an officer talking to someone, or two walking down the road, it was just interactions like any other place and time.
Thank you. Several along this line, what did you bring back that you can use? Are you glad you went? Would you recommend this to others in your systems?
So for my agency, a little different than local law enforcement, typical, what everyone in here would consider policing. That is not what we do, is the training. Most impressed with the level of training, the frequency of training, the dedication on the officers' behalf of participating in training. Because of those things, they get worth out of that. Whereas we all have our required training, and here I've done it for 28 years, and we just kind of check the box and go through it. So to me, that's something we've got to. I have to emphasize back to my agencies that we're training for reality, and if we don't, it's coming, and we're not going to be ready. The Israeli police and the Israeli people are they're prepared. I mean, they have to, but not in fear. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's back when the sociologist hat I wear is I expected to see this culture of air raid or missile warnings, and just to me, folks have to have PTSD, but they don't exhibit. Life is like there are no threats. I mean, that's just, I've been all over that country now, and it's a sense of, and maybe that's normality. But an outsider coming in would not know. I think we would expect to see a culture of fear. The culture of fear is not there. Not a fear of the police, not a fear of outside geopolitics. It's a sense of unity and common direction.
It was like being in the 51st state. The United States had a 51st state like that. To me, is what it seemed like. With a little bit better food. A lot of fresh vegetables and hummus. But what I would bring back, was, I think the question was what would you bring back? That was some of the leadership style. The way you could tell, even the senior commanders, they were very respected by the troops. But you could also tell through the interactions, they were almost, it was a brotherhood, a true brotherhood. Not like, some departments have that here, like on my department, well, I won't use my department. And some other hypothetical police department. Sometimes the rank and file, there's always just like a mistrust of command staff, us versus them. There, I didn't get that sense at all. It was almost like an officer wouldn't have no problem voicing his or her opinion to a senior executive. And the reason for that is because they live in an environment where that officer sees and experiences matters. He or she might see something that they might need to change in the training. which is another thing what Gerald mentioned was their policy is if a field training officer tells a recruit out in the field, don't do it like they showed you in the academy, do it the way I told you. That's common here, you hear that all the time. Forget what you learned in the academy. That's an absolute no-go over there. They will stop that guy's training, they'll go back to the academy and say, okay, who's right, who's wrong? Does the academy need to change? Do we need to change? Remember that thing?
And the reason for that is you're sitting here acknowledging is though Israel is big in one sense, it's one jurisdiction, and it was made clear to us that if there's an issue rising in Jerusalem, officers from Piper are coming down, and officers from Lot are going up, and Tel Aviv across. That's why it can't be. You forget what you're trying. I mean, you can see it and feel it. That I know when he shows up, he knows what to do. Just because he's from Haifa, he's got my back. I mean, we're on the same street, and that's unique to.
It's kind of like we've done that. We've done that with active response to active shooters here. We've gotten that right here. We're all the same. We all know what to do. But other things, it's just it would be kind of we have to sort things out first. Over there, they've got it. They've got it together.
Did you encounter or do any exchanges with border police?
Yes, we spent a good amount of time with them. We went to their training facility. We'll probably spend a total of maybe a day and a half total. Collectively, we saw them in Jerusalem. They're involved in Jerusalem pretty heavily. They were our escorts in the old city. So yes, short answer is yes, we did. We did spend some time with the border police.
You commented to me earlier on the effectiveness, efficiency of the border police, and how remarkable that was.
So there was a morning that was built into today's border police, and I guess it was West Bank. We weren't right on it, but from here maybe out to Highway 15, we could see they were explaining that 10,000 people may cross back and forth at this particular border in any given day. You know, to us, that's just mind-blowing. And we would not have known that 500 people. It was very efficient. We interacted very little with them. We said the Blue Shirts is who we were with 99.9. When we went to Jerusalem, we did pick up 2 border officers in addition to our Blue Shirts that walked with us only in the old city, just kind of kept us like little ducklings to make sure we didn't get lost. And we got back on the bus and moved on. So that was really our involvement with the border police.
And really, that brings us back, if you don't mind, that brings us back to the question when you asked about the human rights issue.
Yeah.
It really was, a lot of what we saw was kind of the opposite. When we talk about the border police, one of the things they talked about was we're at this border crossing from West Bank into Israel proper. And they process, one of their goals is to get that processing time down as short as they can per person. Because the people there want to come over and work and then go back. So they got to where they can process 10,000 people in this one station. And they've gotten where I think they started at 2 minutes per person. Now they're down to like 30 seconds to process somebody and get them in so they can work. I mean, because they're trying to make it so they have a livelihood. So that was pretty good.
So
and they didn't really care about making that happen.
one of the questions I have to ask it because it was asked, did you see any signs of abuse at the border crossings?
So we saw no signs of abuse throughout the country, and certainly not at any border crossing. But the overall answer is none at all, nowhere.
The next 2 questions are sort of philosophic. One makes this comment. In Israel, the security issue seems to be based on community safety, and in the States, on property safety. Did you experience or discuss these differences?
To that question, no. I will agree that it is, the focus is on the overall safety of the state of Israel and its people. And again, it's not just the police. I think there is a sense from the citizenry of that also. And it just all ties back into the training and the readiness And it is a philosophy of, so the philosophy that was conveyed to us is a hostile force, we're so small, especially in the middle, could be in Tel Aviv within an hour. So they have a sense of heightened awareness. But to answer the back part of that question, so if we have here in the States, if we have a sense of heightened awareness, you start to see long guns, you start to see policies like stop and frisk, you start to see a little more, we are leading toward a little more, less citizen rights and a little more public safety, that balance. I mean, when things, bombings and such, there, again, maybe it's just the culture, but then it's just part of our life. And there is no separating the two.
And a good example of that is people, we saw people going into a shopping mall, and there's security guards who work also, they have to obey the police. Police are in charge of everything. So people were getting their bags checked, and I think at one point the lady, one of the guards turns back, and there's a lady who could have went right in, but she didn't. She stopped. She tapped the guy on the shoulder. Here's my bag. Check it. This is the way it is. This is a natural thing. Nobody complained ever. Everything, any kind of back check or checkpoint, you didn't hear it complaining. That's how people have adapted to that lifestyle.
It just reinforces, to me, the citizen goes, I have a responsibility to be safe, and I want you to have that too. So check me in.
In that regard, a good question is, what were you taught, if anything, to do to de-escalate confrontational situations in the community?
I guess our experience in Akau was a pretty good example of that. And we're good at it here now. I think at least in Fayetteville, of de-escalating an overall community issue before it gets big by having those personal relationships. That's what it's all about. And that's one thing, if I can elaborate a little bit on that, that's one thing where I thought they were a little bit behind us, was in community policing and the philosophy of community-oriented policing. When it first started, you had these community policing units. Like, here's a group of people that aren't real crime fighters, they're just going to go out and hug babies and stuff like that. That's our community police unit. That's how it started in the 90s here in the U.S. Then, if you're doing it right, you should not have a community policing unit. Your entire organization should be community-oriented. So every beat cop should have a relationship with the clerks at the clerk at the quick stop. That's that level. As a captain, I have a personal relationship with all my council members who are elected in my area. They all have my phone number. All the local preachers of the churches, they all have my phone number. They all know they can walk into my police station at any time. So it's all those relationships at every level that really make the difference. And they're probably getting there, but I see that we're just a little bit ahead in that. I think I brought that up to them while we were there.
The commander of Haifa made a point to what Captain Paul said. So again, it was addressed in Haifa. It could be addressed in all the precincts we went, and somebody had already said it, and they were talking about stolen cars or traffic violations or something. But it was portrayed to us, we got a sense that at least in Haifa, and so knowing they've got a unified police force, I don't know why not the rest, that they have the foot officer, and they have little scooters. Instead of light patrol, it's like a little motorized, a moped, a little faster than that. But it was emphasized that this officer will cover a particular neighborhood, and those folks have that officer's number and things of that nature. So that's a sense of community policing.
Thank you very much. That's a sense of the questions to you. There are two questions that were probably addressed more to Mike and me. Let me answer them. One is the rule not to exchange police officers with Israel still in effect. There actually is no specific law. The City Council passed a statement which can be interpreted as law, but it's confined to the city of Durham. The other question is, did we invite members of the council? Yes. Did we invite candidates for the commission? Yes. Did we invite police officers? Yes. Did we invite members of the communities of color? Yes. And we're very glad that you came, but we couldn't get everybody we invited here. And thank you all very, very much for being here.
did not go.
I did not go and get trained in the proper rules, and I've screwed up. I have a gift for both of our guests today, but only one of them has arrived. So we could do the King Solomon. Yeah, no. We decided that since he comes to Raleigh all the time, he's going to get his gift in delayed fashion.
I live toward Burlington, I drive this way.
So this is for you, Lars. Thank you.